Yeah,
We took some L's, but still prevailed. I'm blessed, I ain't stressed.
I'm blessed.
A lot of signs you gotta peep on this road to success.
Let's go.
Got heavy eyes cause I don't sleep, I'm on the road to that check.
Let's go.
Got blood in my flesh, run it up to invest. I cut some people off, we had to level up, ain't letting up. Box truck couple, they can't mess with us, come mess with us.
What's up, y'all? Chrissy with the Boxtruck couple. Listen, we have another good one for you today. We are welcoming back Michael from Dispatch Experts. As you guys know, if you've seen him in previous videos, he is very knowledgeable about the dispatching industry, and I look forward to another conversation. So without further ado, I give you Michael from Dispatch Experts.
Hey everyone, it's great to be back. Thank you so much for having me, Christy. Again, my name is Michael. I'm the Director of Operations and one of the founders at Dispatch Experts. And I'm excited to have a conversation with you today, Christy.
Well, we're excited to have you, Michael. I've got actually a list of things that I want to talk about based off of conversations that I've had with new people coming into the industry, as well as people that are trying to find their way. So I hope you're ready. We got some good things to talk about.
Ready when you are.
Okay, wonderful. So I think one of the biggest concerns that people have, especially new owner operators coming into the industry, is do they really need a dispatch? So I guess my first question is, do owner operators really need a dispatching service?
This is an amazing question, and I'm so happy that we're starting out from here. And the answer is not always. A lot of the times, whether it is for financial reasons or experience, carriers do not need dispatching services. And it's just as important to know when you need dispatching services as it is to know when you do not need dispatching services. And there are many factors related to this that I really hope we can discuss today.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So what are some of the factors that would determine whether a person would need dispatching or not?
First of all, and most importantly, it's going to be the financial reason. When we start out as a new MC, our expenses are very high. We've already put in some of the startup costs. We're probably paying a lot more for insurance than carriers that have experience. And we're not aware of all the expenses that we're going to incur as we get on the road, as we start driving, with the lodging fees, with the meals, with tolls, etc. If everything put together, you are left with a very slim margin. Adding a dispatching cost to it is not going to help your business. In these cases, perhaps it makes more sense for you to undergo a training, some sort of a mentorship, and do the dispatching yourself rather than have to pay a certain amount from every single load that you do to a dispatcher.
That goes along with, we talked about it in our last conversation, knowing your cost per mile, what it takes to run your business, right? And so if it doesn't make sense financially, because everybody's overhead is going to be different, and that depends on whether they're renting a truck or leasing a truck, or whether they own it outright, whether they're making a truck payment, how many other bills do they have drivers that they're paying, etc. So I really understand that part of it. But if someone, a new owner operator coming into the business, doesn't understand things like what the market that they live in, or how to understand the market, or how to even understand the cost per mile, how can a dispatching service help them?
A dispatching service per se cannot, but what they would need to do is, again, whether it is mentorship or some sort of a training program, they need to actually get a certain minimum level of knowledge about the industry. And market research, and we'll talk about it more, and I'll actually tell you how we do market research for our carriers and their home bases. But that certain level is required, because never mind about the financial reasons, never mind about whether you need a dispatcher or not. If you don't have a certain level of knowledge, you're unable to distinguish if what the dispatcher is offering you is good or bad.
Right.
If you don't have that minimum knowledge of the market, knowledge of your own equipment that you're running, you're not going to know what your dispatcher is offering you. At times, you'll hear loads that are low in rate, but maybe they make sense, which me and you have talked about that sometimes they do instead of sitting idle, right? And if you don't know how to understand the dispatcher, if you don't know what the dispatcher is offering you, because again, dispatchers don't make decisions, they give options. The decision is ultimately by the owner, by the driver. If you're unable to understand what's being offered to you, that's equivalent to you not needing dispatching services, because the dispatcher is not going to be able to do their job properly, because whatever they're offering is either being questioned for no reason, or it's not being questioned when it needs to be questioned if the offer is not good, if the offer does not make sense.
Right. Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So I get a dispatcher. I understand the basics of trucking, and I find a dispatcher that I really like. I think we'll work well together. How do I use that dispatcher effectively?
Communication.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whenever you're working with a dispatcher, it's obvious that you do not have a lot of contracts that are just going to keep on sending you rate confirmation and you're going to be on dedicated lanes. If you're using a dispatcher, most likely the dispatcher is on the spot market calling on those loads as they're getting posted.
Mm-hmm.
And me and you have also talked about this, but everything good is gone either first thing in the morning or within 5 minutes of being posted.
Mm-hmm.
So the most important factor of a dispatcher carrier relationship is communication. You need to establish the communication avenues from the beginning, whether it is text messaging, phone calls. But when a dispatcher is talking to a broker, and once again, I will say this, the dispatcher does not have the authority to make decisions. You can have prior authorizations to the dispatcher that will help, but in most cases, the dispatcher calls the carrier and says, hey, this is what I have, this is where it's picking up, this is where it's dropping off, weight, pallets, etc. And the carrier, the owner, makes the decision whether to go with it or not. If the owner takes too long, if the owner does not respond to text messages, does not respond to phone calls, that load's going to be gone. Now, in this case, the carrier lost the load and the dispatcher's time got wasted, and the dispatcher himself or herself is getting discouraged. If the communication is bad, they're putting in the time, they're working on commission.
Mm-hmm.
So communication is going to be key in all of this.
So what's the first step in good communication between an owner operator and a dispatcher? What's effective communication? What's the expectation?
For me, and I'll go back to the days when I was dispatching, for me, I had different levels of communications with different carriers that I was working, because not everybody's working styles are the same, right? I'd have people who'd say, Mike, text me. And I'd have people who said, I'm driving, don't text me, call me and tell me what it is.
Gotcha.
And that's
what I'm hearing, excuse me for interrupting you. So what I'm hearing, the first step is you have to establish what's going to work for you from the beginning.
Of course. And there are so many questions that can get asked at the beginning. And the basics and the obvious are truck type, weight capacity, door opening, and all of that. But then also a carrier needs to have a conversation with a dispatcher regarding their load preferences, not just the physicality of it, but the rates, the miles that they're willing to drive. Because the dispatcher needs to know if you're not willing to go northeast. The dispatcher needs to know if certain rates are below your minimum rate per mile, going back to the conversation that we were having, and not necessarily not to take any of those loads, but consider them, because there's another thing that me and you have discussed is working in averages rather than working in per load basis. So if the dispatcher knows, say, your break even or your minimum rate per mile is at $1.10, and then the dispatcher is like, oh, we got to come out of Florida. I'm going to take you something for 90 cents, but then we're going to take something for $1.40 to make sure you're above and you're making money. And I'm just throwing numbers out there. And I used Florida because they have the terrible rates out there.
And I understand exactly. And I may have told you this before, but I had someone in my mentorship program that took a very good load. I think it paid almost $3 a mile to Florida, and had to get an 80-cent per mile load coming out of Florida to get to the next load that waiting on her that paid over $2 a mile. So one load was almost embarrassing, right? It paid for the fuel and it got her to the next big thing. And so it all evened out by the end of the week. It might not have evened out for the day, but by the end of the week, she was above ground instead of below it, if that makes sense.
Of course, and in those cases, as a side note, when you're coming out of places like that, you want the shortest miles possible to get out of the dead zone. So if
Right,
you are taking a load for 80 cents a mile and you're stuck somewhere south in Florida, get it to Georgia, go to
right,
Savannah, right?
right,
Don't take one going out to Chicago so that you're just 80 centing all the way
right,
to Midwest, right? Get the shortest amount of miles. Going back to knowledge, and that also translates into knowing when to look for. I know your viewers are mainly box truck operators.
mhm,
Knowing when not to look for box truck loads, knowing when to think outside of the box and look at dry van loads that possibly match with the weight and the length category, and calling those brokers and asking them, hey, can I pick this up with a box truck?
right,
Once your MC is a little aged and there is a bigger pool of brokers that's working with you, trying to actually do multiple partials, because this is something that we do every day for our clients. And this is something that helps out with box truck operators going above those rates that are stuck between $1.20 to $1.60 right now,
right,
if I average out overall.
right. So you said something that was really important. Two things, actually. The first one was when you're calling the broker about that load for a 53 footer, you should always mention that you have a box truck.
100%.
You never want to grab that load because the weight is right for your truck and not tell the broker, because it could be 53 feet of foam that only
Yeah,
adds up to 1,500 pounds,
it,
right?
it,
So
it could be one pole that's 36 feet.
right. So you want to communicate that with a broker and let them confirm that it's okay to take your load. And the reason being is you never want to establish yourself in anyone's system as someone that tries to beat the system, scam the system, not
Absolutely.
trustworthy, etc. Because if you get blacklisted in the system, then nobody's going to work with you. So communication on that point is the key too. But the other thing that you said was important, and I'll let you talk about it a little bit, is partials. Brand new authorities and partials don't mix. So can you tell us why it's important to be careful with partials as a new MC?
Of course. First of all, just going back to your point, and this is a little bit of a tip, and this is something that we tell every single dispatcher that does that, calling on loads that aren't necessarily posted for box trucks. We start the conversation with, before I waste your time, I want to say that I want to pick this up with a box truck. Not wait for the broker to give you all the details and
Right,
then at the end be like, hey, by the way, I have a box truck, because that is also frustrating.
right,
Right. So start out with be like, hey, I know you posted this for a dry van, but can this be picked up with a 26-foot box truck that's dock high? Right.
right.
Give them information and just right away come out with it, and it will definitely be appreciated.
Absolutely. What about hot shot loads? If is it possible for box truck drivers to go after those loads? You see a hot shot load on the board?
More often than not, we do look at hotshot loads. Again, key to it, mention your truck type.
Absolutely.
Because hotshot loads can get loaded from the side. They might not have a dock. They might not have the equipment required to load a box truck. So always, always, always be very clear with the equipment that you're picking up. And I'll even say this, and with the sizes of the box trucks, be very careful when you're booking something with a 24-foot box truck that's posted for a 26-foot box truck. It
Gotcha.
might seem a little, but you will go to the shipper and they will not load you, and you're going to get blacklisted. And especially as a new MC, especially the way the industry is right now, that's not tendered to cater to new MCs. You don't want to lose a single broker that is willing to work with you.
I think new owner operators feel like brokers are just trying to be mean, or whatever their thought is on why brokers handle us as owner operators the way they do sometimes. And I do agree that at times, because I've had brokers just hang up on me, not even say, you can't take the load or your authority's new or that, just hang up. And that was rude. But I also know that since coming into the box truck business in 2021, there have been a lot of owner operators that came and went that didn't exactly do things the right way. And it made it hard on box truck drivers now because they weren't honest about the size of their truck. If they were supposed to have wooden floors and they had aluminum floors, they were supposed to pick up a load by a certain time and they were either extremely late or they just didn't show. It's been a lot of stuff that happened over the last few years in the box truck industry with new owner operators that really didn't have someone to guide them and show them the right way, or just really didn't care. There's a lot of reasons behind even the pay, why brokers treat drivers the way that they do. But we have an opportunity on the dispatching side as well as the driver side to turn that around. And one of those things is by building relationships. How important is it for new MCs to build relationships with these brokers?
Crucial. I would rank it as one of the top 3 things that you need to do, because and some of the things that you said, falling out of loads and all of that, and I'll explain. When you book a load, when you confirm it, and before even getting anything, then you cancel it, that's still considered falling out. And this is something that brokers take track of. This is something that they will tell you, be like, hey, you're new, you just set up, and you have 2 fallouts. And one might be enough for them to decide not to work with you. And yes, often enough they hang up. But again, to your point, you're absolutely right. During the day, there is so many dishonest people that they have to deal with. People that are trying to do double brokering, people that are going to misrepresent their equipment, people that are going to not even cancel, just not show to their pickups. And they have to handle their clients. Their clients are actually requesting off of them not to work with new MCs because of the bad experiences they had in the past. This is all a result of something that happened. This isn't something that they all of a sudden decided, just woke up one day and were like, hey, we're not going to work with new MCs. It was based on experience. And this makes that much more important to build those relationships. Because once you have that foot through the door, you did that load with the broker, you want to maintain communication, pristine communication, doing the updates, letting them know it's okay to be late. It's not okay to tell them that you're going to be late. It's okay to have issues. We work in an industry where we're affected by weather, traffic, and so many factors. It's never okay not to pick up the phone. It's never okay not to update the broker about your location. And when you do this, when you have kept reasonable dispatch, you've delivered the load as you had promised, tell the broker, hey, this is my area, I'm going to be there. And going back to I want to circle back to what we spoke about, also know who you're going to build those relationships with, which kind of brings us, and I know we're going to talk about market research, but when you're seeing what's posted in your area, what goes out, what comes back, take a look at who's posting. Take a look at the broker's presence. What market share do they have? And maybe they're not going to work with you right now. Call them and be like, hey, I know you're not going to work with new MCs. Tell me when you're gonna. So if it's 2 months, if it's 3 months, you're dead on. You don't even wait for them to post the load. The moment your MC turns 90 days old, you submit that setup form. You ask them to send you that setup form.
Absolutely. What about, hey, I know you told me you would take me in 90 days. It's only been 60 days, but look, I've had 3 inspections and I passed them all. Would you consider me? Would you advise that? Or would your dispatching service try that?
Absolutely. And not just that, we've also asked brokers if they could accept our previous loads done as references.
Gotcha.
And it has worked. It hasn't worked a lot. It has worked. It doesn't take much to say, if someone doesn't hang up on you, in the example you brought, if someone's like, hey, sorry, we don't work with new MCs, just be like, listen, either way, I've done so many loads. I've worked with this and this company. Do you think your compliance will accept my previous rate confirmations as references? Is it possible to override? Worst case scenario, they're going to say no, but they're already
Right.
saying no. So an extra 20 seconds of asking them if it's possible to override, it's worth it.
Right. And how you ask is important as well. We want to always remain professional and we want to be as kind as possible in every conversation because, sometimes people have a bad day, but they do remember how you treated them. And so if I'm kind in my speech, if I'm not demanding, and if I'm professional, it goes a long way. And that's what dealing with brokers, that's what dealing with dispatchers. We deal with so many different people in the trucking industry. It's important to remain professional. And that is a part of your resume. It follows you. They're going to always remember meant to be trucking because of how my husband and I were professional. We showed up on time. We were kind. We were helpful, etc.
Of course, it's going to be more rewarding than not.
Absolutely.
Because you got to remember that these people, they all want to work with professional people. They all want it to be flawless. They all want to have the communication. Nobody enjoys having issues with their load, right? So when you do provide that, when you are professional, when you are calm, even when the person on the other end of the line isn't being calm with you,
Right.
just keep your cool. And if it's getting out of hand, switch it to email, but always keep a certain level of professional behavior because that is always going to be more rewarding than not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that leads us back to dispatching. Michael, who is a good dispatcher?
This is a very good question. And I'll say this for me. A good dispatcher is one that maintains communication, first of all. And I've said this, it's a two-way street. It can't be just the carrier maintaining communication with the dispatcher. It also has to be the dispatcher because the dispatcher is supposed to be that extra, be the
Right.
help, right? If the dispatcher is not doing, and it can be related to so many things. Simple enough as in being like, if the weight wasn't noticed by the carrier, the dispatcher must know this to flag this. If
Right.
there's something wrong in the rate confirmation, the dispatcher must flag it because the dispatcher is the first one that's taking a look at it.
Right.
The rate confirmation, and I'll dwell on this a little bit because it's so important what's put in that rate confirmation. And I'm sure you've seen this too. When you see a load, it's posted for a certain miles, it's posted with a certain pickup, and then the rate confirmation comes, and so many of it doesn't match. So you're
Right.
picking up all of a sudden 120 miles, completely different direction where they said you were going to be in.
Right.
Detention isn't even mentioned.
Right.
And also appointment times, you said it's first come, first serve. All of a sudden, it's a set appointment.
Right.
And all of these things, if you don't flag it before you sign the rate confirmation, you've signed the rate confirmation.
Right.
It's a binding contract. So even if you call the broker and be like, hey, you told me this, you told me that. If the broker is being dry, it can be like, you saw the rate confirmation. Everything
Right.
was in it. Why did you sign it then? Right? Detail oriented, maintaining communication, and thinking outside of the box. These days, a dispatcher cannot just be the person who's very good at filling out parameters on a load board.
Right.
If your dispatcher is just putting SB for a straight box truck, picking up here, going there, search, no results, sorry, there's no results,
Right.
you have yourself a terrible dispatcher.
Right.
And a dispatcher has to take into account where they're sending you. And unfortunately, the only way this can be tested when they actually send you somewhere, but you have to have the ability to flag it at the beginning. This is where we come back to your own market knowledge, right? When you're like, hey, you're sending me here. I know it's a dead zone. How do you plan on bringing me back? A
Right.
good dispatcher with that same example would be like, hey, I know I'm sending you to a dead zone, and this is my plan. And similarly, so he'll say, or she'll say, you know what? I'm sending you to a hot zone. I don't want to book anything yet because I feel like if we wait, we'll make a little bit more. All of that comes from experience. All of that comes from knowledge. All of that comes from proper communication.
What about dispatching for yourself? What's your advice on dispatching for yourself?
I think, especially as a new MC, if you have the know-how to actually do it yourself, you can benefit from it a lot. Now, a lot of the times, and obviously the first question is going to arise, but I'm on the road. It's true. You're going to have to book while on the go. Using your phone to find loads, I would recommend against it, because just visually it's not for you to see what's out there, just because I know they make the phones bigger now, but it's not enough. It would be better if you have some sort of a tablet or something, and we all have the capabilities to hotspot it and have internet wherever we are. If you can do it, because you're the one that knows when you're getting empty, you're the one that might need something on a weekend, you're the one that might need something late at night. And although there's very few postings late at night, but they are there, and your dispatcher cannot physically be there 24/7 and cannot physically just be awake at every single time you possibly have an emergency. And we've seen this a lot. A lot of people don't have a dispatcher, as in you take a hold of it, you're just going to do all of it, I'm just going to drive and not worry about it. There's a healthy balance that can be achieved, where you work alongside with the dispatcher. And I think that's what defines, as long as a dispatcher is help, as long as a dispatcher brings in value, that's when you have a good dispatcher. If you're looking load for yourself, I'll go back to communication. It's okay to call the dispatcher and be like, hey, Mike, by the way, I found something. I'm going to go here, start looking from here now. Now, this has 2 points. A, let's not waste the dispatcher's time to keep on looking when you've already booked something for yourself. And B, you're giving them the heads up, and they have the opportunity to start looking while during that time, while you're still driving. Dispatcher comes up with something good throughout the time. Everybody's happy. You have to take a 4-hour break, sit down, take a look at the board. And I will encourage this for people who are working with dispatchers, because when you're looking at the board yourself, don't question these things that are being offered to you. Or rather, I'll change that. You question them reasonably, because it's easy to get frustrated when rates are bad, when loads aren't there. And when you're not looking at that same load board, everyone's going to think the dispatcher is sitting somewhere, flipping channels through the TV while operating a mouse and being like, there's nothing. But if you're there, if you see that there's nothing and something good comes your way, you're able to take it right away. And opposite thing would happen is when you see there's a lot of good option and the dispatcher is calling you with below market average rates, this is a flag. This is when you're like, hey, bud, no. And this is when you don't need a dispatcher. And in all of this, if you come to a point when you're able to do this without the help of the dispatcher, of course, it's better for your business not to have a dispatcher.
You've touched on a couple times about good or proper market analysis. Let's talk about that.
We took some L's but still prevailed, I'm blessed, I ain't stressed. A lot of signs you gotta peep on this road to success. Got heavy eyes cause I don't sleep, I'm on the road to that check. Got blood in my flesh, run it up to invest. I cut some people off, we had to level up, ain't letting up.